The Jin Dynasty didn't collapse in defeat. It collapsed after it won. It had unified China after the chaos of the Three Kingdoms. Peace should have followed. But instead of stability, the empire tore itself apart from the inside. Civil wars among princes, court intrigues, and factional struggles left the empire hollow. And when the center weakens, someone else always moves in. Now imagine what came next. Not one new empire, not a clean restart, but 300 years where the question, who is in charge here, had no clear answer. 300 years where your ethnicity, your language, your customs could change based on which army controlled your city that week. This was the age of the Northern and Southern Dynasties, and it reshaped China more deeply than almost any era before or after. Not through unity, but through collision. 300 years of division. But what comes out the other side? When conquerors and conquered live together long enough, who really wins? And when governments collapse, where do people turn for meaning? To understand the answers, we have to start in the north. In just over a century, 16 different kingdoms rose and fell in northern China. 16. To put that in perspective, the western half of the Roman Empire lasted nearly 500 years under one continuous imperial system. Northern China went through 16 dynasties in roughly the same amount of time it takes for a child to grow up, have children of their own, and watch them become adults. For ordinary people, this wasn't history. This was life. You were born under one ruler. You raised your children under another. You died under a third. And none of them lasted long enough to fix the roads, fill the granaries, or stop the next army from arriving. War, famine, and migration became normal. Large numbers of Han Chinese families fled south across the Yangtze River. They carried with them their books, their farming techniques, their crafts, their traditions. But why was the South safer? Well, one word: geography. The Yangtze River formed a natural barrier that nomadic cavalry could not easily cross. The northern peoples were masters of horses and open plains. But water was a different battlefield entirely. And in the south, there was still a functioning government. Weak, aristocratic, politically unstable, but at least continuous. It was called the Eastern Jin. In the north, you might live under 3 different rulers in a single decade. In the south, you at least knew which dynasty was in charge. That basic predictability was enough to make it the destination of choice for anyone who could afford to leave. A quick note on the name itself. The Northern and Southern Dynasties is exactly what it sounds like, 2 parallel worlds. In the south, after the Eastern Jin eventually fell, a succession of dynasties continued. Song, Qi, Liang, and Chen, all Han Chinese, all based in the south, all insisting they were the real China. In the north, a different succession of states competed for the same claim. Neither recognized the other as legitimate. In Chinese historical tradition, there has always been a concept of 正前辈, legitimacy, the right to be called the true center of civilization. And that center has almost always been assumed to be in the north. The Yellow River, not the Yangtze, is where Chinese civilization first took root. This cultural bias toward the north runs through Chinese history even today. But the story of the northern and southern dynasties is really the story of both. What had once been the less populated frontier of the empire suddenly became the new center of Chinese civilization. Now picture 2 Chinas existing at the same time. In the north, armies constantly on the move, cities changing hands, farmers abandoning their fields, children growing up not knowing which language they would hear in the marketplace. In the south, aristocrats debating philosophy over wine, poets writing about the sound of rain on bamboo, painters capturing mist over mountains. Same civilization, same written language, completely different worlds. One man captured the spirit of the South perfectly. His name was Tao Yuanming. He had served as a government official. Then one day, he quit. Not dramatically, not in protest. He simply decided that government service in a world of constant instability was not worth the compromise. He went home, he farmed, he wrote poetry about chrysanthemums, about autumn light, about the sound of wind through pine trees. To modern readers, this sounds peaceful, but understand what he was really saying. In a world where political power means nothing, the only thing worth having is inner peace. That idea, that withdrawal from chaos is not defeat, but wisdom, became one of the defining values of Chinese culture. And it was born in the South during 300 years of division. But the most important transformation was happening in the North. After generations of conflict, one powerful state finally emerged. It was called the Northern Wei. Its rulers were from the Xinbei people, a nomadic society of horsemen from the northern steppe. They had conquered northern China. But now they faced a problem every conqueror eventually faces. You've won the land. Now what? You can rule as foreign overlords. Keep your language, your clothes, your customs. That works for a generation, maybe two. But resentment grows. The conquered people never fully accept you, and your own children grow up not knowing whether they belong to the steppe or the city. The emperor, Xiordi, chose a different path. He didn't just adopt Chinese customs. He ordered his entire court. Nobles were required to change their tribal surnames into Chinese ones. Officials who spoke the old steppe language at court were punished. Traditional nomadic clothing was banned, and the capital was moved from the northern frontier to the ancient Chinese city of Luoyang. Some Xianbei nobles called it betrayal. We conquered them, they said. Why are we becoming them? But Xiao Wendi understood something deeper. You can win a war with weapons, but you can only rule with legitimacy. And in China, legitimacy meant being seen as the guardian of civilization. And civilization meant Chinese culture. To rule China, you had to become Chinese. Not just in name, in spirit. This was not weakness. It was one of the most sophisticated acts of political intelligence in the entire era. At the same time, another force was reshaping the spiritual world of the people: Buddhism. Why does religion spread fastest during times of chaos? Think about it. When institutions fail, when governments collapse, when the future feels uncertain, people look for meaning somewhere else. Buddhism arrived in China at exactly the right moment. It didn't promise political stability. It promised something more valuable: a way to make sense of suffering. The scale of Buddhist devotion during this era is almost impossible to imagine today. At Yungam, workers carved an entire cliff face into a gallery of Buddhist sculptures. The largest Buddha stands over 15 meters tall. It took decades and thousands of workers to complete. At Longmen, the carvings stretched for miles along the banks of a river. Why would rulers spend such enormous resources on religious monuments during times of constant war? Because religion was doing something their armies couldn't. It was giving people a reason to believe that suffering had meaning, that this life was not all there was, that something better was possible. Every dynasty tried to claim the mandate of heaven, but Buddhism made a different claim entirely. It said the mandate of heaven was irrelevant. What mattered was the state of your soul. In a world where political authority changed every few years, that was a revolutionary idea. In a divided world, Buddhism became a shared spiritual language. And so, 3 centuries passed. In the north, ethnic boundaries blurred. In the south, culture and economy matured. China was still divided, but something deeper was happening. The north, after centuries of warfare and integration, had developed stronger military organization and a far greater tolerance for ethnic diversity. The South, though culturally rich, had never solved its political problem. Too many aristocratic families, too little central authority. When strength meets fragmentation, the outcome is rarely surprising. So when the Sui dynasty rose in the north and swept south in less than a decade, it ended 300 years of division and reunited China. Now let's answer the questions we asked at the beginning. What comes out the other side of 300 years of division? A China very different from the one that had broken apart. The conquerors had become Chinese, and China itself had absorbed the conquerors. It was no longer a single ethnic civilization. It had become something larger, a civilization capable of absorbing different peoples, different traditions, different ways of life, and emerging stronger for it. When governments collapsed, people turned to Buddhism. And Buddhism became not just a religion, but a shared cultural foundation that crossed every political border. The Northern and Southern dynasties were not an age of glory. They were an age of collision. But out of that collision, a new civilization was born. One strong enough to enter the great unified empires of the Sui and the Tang.